Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. My name is Matt. I know this podcast is quite new, but some of you have been following along for a while now. As you may have noticed, the narrator has changed a couple of times already in just a few months. The truth is, the podcast has been growing extremely slow, and basically nobody has left us any reviews so far. I'm here as the new voice of the podcast and would love to stick around, but I need your support to do so. Please, if you enjoy our content, it would mean so much to us if you could just leave us a review on whichever podcast platform you use. Now, take a deep breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a place where your evening transitions into a gentle adventure. Tonight, you will find yourself by the fireside at a snowbound inn, far from the noise and rush of daily life. As you listen to my voice, let your breathing slow and deepen, feeling your body sink into the mattress beneath you. Imagine cold flakes falling outside, the crunch of snow underfoot, and the warm glow of a hearth waiting just for you. Picture the rustic wooden beams overhead, the smell of pine and smoke mingling in the air, and the comfort of a thick blanket around your shoulders. You have nothing to do and nowhere else to be right now. Allow yourself to relax completely. Gently close your eyes and let the rhythm of your breath become your guide. Inhale slowly through your nose, drawing in peace. Exhale gently through your mouth, releasing any tension you might be holding. With each breath, you feel lighter, calmer, more present. This story will carry you to a peaceful place where time slows and cares dissolve. In a few moments, you will meet the Snowbound Inn, and its fireside will keep you warm and safe. Settle in and let go. You are safe here, and I will be with you the entire way. Feel the crisp winter air against your cheeks as you imagine walking through a forest blanketed in thick snow. Your boots leave soft prints behind, creating a trail that leads you through quiet trees, standing tall and still. Snowflakes float down like tiny feathers, landing silently on your hat and coat. Ahead, a faint orange glow appears between the trunks, beckoning you forward. The closer you get, the more clearly you hear the crackling of logs and the murmur of friendly voices. Take another deep breath in, letting the smell of burning wood and spices drift around you. With every step, your muscles release their tension. Shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, and your mind clears. The weight of worries and to-do lists melts away, just like snowflakes melting on your skin. As you approach the welcoming light, you feel an anticipation similar to stepping inside from the cold on a winter's night. Comfort, warmth, and belonging await you. You don't need to hurry. This path is yours alone, and the cozy fireside of the Snowbound Inn is waiting patiently to embrace you. The heavy wooden door swings open with a gentle creak as you arrive, and warm air washes over you like a gentle wave. A friendly innkeeper smiles and gestures you inside, guiding you toward a chair by the hearth. As you remove your coat, the heat of the fire begins to loosen any remaining tension in your muscles. You feel the soft fabric of a woolen blanket across your lap, and the glow of flames dances in your vision. The inn's walls are lined with shelves of books, small paintings of mountain scenes, and polished antique trinkets that tell stories of travelers who have come before. There is a sense of timelessness here, as if the world outside has slowed to a hush, while inside the fire crackles and people share quiet stories. In the corner, a gray cat rests curled in a basket, purring softly as it sleeps. You feel safe, warm, and deeply at ease. As you settle into the chair, the narrative of this snowy evening unfolds around you, and the focus gently shifts to those within the inn, inviting you to observe their gentle world from a peaceful distance. You can simply listen and relax, allowing the story to lull you toward rest. In a valley nestled between ancient mountains, an inn stood quietly beneath heavy drifts of snow. The building was constructed of timber and stone, its roof layered with thick white fluff and icicles glistening like crystals along the eaves. Smoke curled lazily from a broad chimney, carrying the scent of burning cedar into the chilled air. Inside, a wide hearth made of river stones dominated the main room, its fire glowing a deep orange and sending out waves of warmth. Around the hearth, chairs of various shapes and sizes had been arranged in a semicircle, each with cushions and blankets to invite weary travelers to rest. Wrought iron hooks hung above the flames, holding a kettle of mulled cider and a pot of savory stew that simmered slowly, filling the inn with aromas of apples, cloves, onions, and herbs. The innkeeper, a gentle woman named Ilara, moved quietly between the tables, making sure each guest had enough to eat and drink. Her movements were smooth and unhurried, and there was a softness to the way she smiled. Outside, snowflakes continued to drift down, coating the ground and muffling every sound beyond the walls. The world seemed to have paused, leaving everyone inside the inn suspended in a cozy bubble, safe from the storm. There were only a few guests at the Snowbound Inn that night. A young couple sat side by side, sharing a thick quilt and reading a book together by candlelight. An elderly man with a long gray beard warmed his hands by the fire and sipped slowly from a ceramic mug, gazing into the flames as if watching memories dance. A middle-aged woman traveling alone hummed a soft tune as she knitted a scarf, her fingers moving methodically through the gentle rhythm of the pattern. Nearby, a pair of siblings played a quiet game of cards, their whispers blending with the crackle of burning wood. Each person was wrapped not only in blankets, but also in the comfort of being part of this small community, if only for a night. They were content to remain silent, appreciating the simple pleasures of warmth, full bellies, and companionship. The snow's insistence outside made them even more grateful for the shelter, turning the inn's humble interior into a sanctuary where time seemed to stretch and expand. Conversations occurred softly, with long pauses and knowing looks, as if even words decided to tread lightly, respecting the tranquility that filled the room. Ilara enjoyed telling stories when the weather forced people to stay. She believed tales had the power to soothe restless minds and bring people together, and the moment felt right. After ensuring everyone had their fill of stew and cider, she took a seat by the hearth, smoothing her apron across her knees. The gray cat stirred in its basket, but sensing the comfort of her voice, settled again, began to purr. Alara spoke softly, her words flowing like water over smooth stones. She told of winters past when the snow piled so high that it formed tunnels between cabins, and of travelers who discovered new friendships while waiting for the thaw. Her stories were like gentle streams, neither dramatic nor frightening, but full of vivid images of crackling ice, bright stars over white fields, and the smell of fresh bread baking while the world slept. The guests listened quietly, letting their imaginations drift with hers. The fire snapped and occasionally sent up a small spark, which quickly faded in the air. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the inn, the mood deepened into one of collective stillness. Each heartbeat slowed, aligning with the slow rhythm of Alara's voice. As the night progressed, the snow outside built up against the doors and windows, creating deeper insulation. The wind that had been whistling through the eaves earlier softened into a whisper, and the world grew ever quieter. If one pressed an ear to the window pane, they would hear only the faint hush of falling flakes and the occasional groan of a tree weighed down by its crystalline burden. The inn's lanterns cast a soft golden glow onto the nearby drifts, making the landscape look like a sea of glowing pillows. Inside, the warmth from the hearth radiated outward, creating layers of comfort. The air carried hints of beeswax from the candles, fresh bread from the oven, and pine resin from the logs. After Alara's stories came to a pause, the guests shifted in their chairs, adjusting blankets and sighing contentedly. Someone began to softly whistle an old song. Another person yawned and covered their mouth with a mittened hand, and still another leaned their head back and closed their eyes. The slow pacing of the evening had lulled them all into a state of ease, and their bodies knew it was time to rest, even if the hour was still early. The inn existed as an island in a white sea, lit by fire and held aloft by kindness. Long before Alara kept the inn, the building had been erected by her grandparents on a clear autumn day when the leaves were just beginning to turn. They chose the spot because of a nearby spring that ran year-round, offering fresh water even during the harshest winters. Over the years, they welcomed travelers, shepherds, merchants, and families seeking refuge from storms. With each visitor, a new story was added to the walls, a new memory woven into the fabric of the inn. Alara grew up listening to these stories and learning how to make simple food taste like a feast. She learned which herbs to add to broth to calm a cough, and how to bake bread that rose high and light despite the cold. She learned the art of listening, understanding that sometimes all a weary traveler needed was a warm place to sit and a gentle presence nearby. Now, as the current storm enveloped the valley, Alara remembered those who built this sanctuary, and she silently thanked them for their foresight. She watched her guests settling into their chairs, a light of gratitude glowing in her heart. For her, there was nothing extraordinary about the night, Yet she sensed that this quiet evening would become another cherished memory woven into the tapestry of the Snowbound Inn. In the kitchen adjoining the main room, the glow of the hearth extended to a large brick oven and wooden counters, worn smooth by decades of use. Earlier in the day, Alara had kneaded dough with steady hands, feeling the soft elasticity as flour and water transformed under her palms. She had added yeast that smelled faintly of apples and let the dough rise under a cloth while snow gathered outside. Now loaves sat cooling on a rack, their crusts golden brown and crackled. Butter softened in a small dish, ready to be spread on slices that would melt in mouths and satisfy hearts. Beside the bread, a pot of porridge simmered for the morning, its oats swelling slowly in milk infused with vanilla and cinnamon. On another counter, rows of dried herbs hung from the ceiling. Sprigs of lavender, bunches of thyme, garlands of rosemary. Their scents mingled into a soothing bouquet that drifted into the main room, blending with the warmth of the fire. Alara took pleasure in these simple preparations, knowing that comfort often came from the humble act of nourishment. To her, cooking was not just about feeding the body, but about creating a sense of being cared for, especially on nights when the world outside seemed inhospitable. At some point in the evening, the elderly man with the gray beard began to speak, his voice as rough as bark, but as gentle as a lullaby. Without prompting, he shared a memory from his youth about another winter many years ago, when he'd been caught in a storm and found refuge in a similar inn. He described how he had traveled by horse-drawn sleigh through a forest, the bells on the harness jingling softly in the frozen air. He told of snowflakes that seemed to hang suspended, of the way moonlight made the world shimmer, and of the relief he felt when he saw a lamplight glowing in the distance. His story was not exciting or dramatic, but it was filled with the same rich sensory details that surrounded them now. As he spoke, the others closed their eyes and let his words paint pictures in their minds. They saw the horse's breath puff out in white clouds, heard the creak of wooden runners, and felt the joy of being welcomed into warmth. When he finished, he smiled and chuckled quietly, as if embarrassed by the attention, but Alara thanked him sincerely. His sharing added another layer of connection to the evening, reminding everyone that long ago and far away, another fire had burned for travelers in need. Outside, beyond the inn's sturdy walls, winter animals went about their lives quietly. In the thicket near the spring, a red fox pressed its nose into the snow, sniffing for mice that tunneled beneath the surface. A pair of deer picked their way through drifts to reach the water, their slender legs disappearing almost to their bellies with each step. Above them, a small owl perched on a snow-laden branch, its feathers puffed out to keep it warm. The moonlight caught in its wide eyes as it listened intently to the rustling below. In the distance, a frozen creek lay under a thick layer of ice, its water humming softly beneath, continuing its journey to the sea. The mountains watched over these small lives, their ridges a line of dark blue against the sky. Snow fell steadily, but these creatures were unfazed. They knew how to survive, how to find food and shelter, even in the harshest conditions. Their presence added to the sense of peaceful continuity that filled the valley. The inn did not exist in isolation. It was part of a wider world that kept moving, breathing, and living even as it seemed still. Those within might be unaware of the fox's hunt, the deer's cautious steps, or the owl's silent vigil. But somehow, the knowledge of these quiet companions made the shelter feel even more complete. A little later, as the flames continued their slow dance, the guests found themselves mesmerized by the patterns in the fire. Each crackle was like a tiny burst of laughter, each flicker a graceful gesture. When they gazed into the glowing embers, they saw shapes that reminded them of distant memories. A childhood friend waving from a snowy hill, a grandmother stirring a pot of soup, a dog bounding through drifts. The longer they watched, the more the boundaries between past and present softened. Time seemed to fold upon itself, bringing forth a feeling that all moments of warmth they had ever experienced were converging right here. The light of the fire painted the beams overhead in shades of gold and amber, highlighting the texture of the wood and the craftsmanship that went into building this refuge. Occasionally a log would shift, sending a small cascade of sparks upward that dissolved before reaching the chimney. These quiet fireworks added a bit of magic to the room, a gentle reminder that beauty often hides in the smallest occurrences. Without words, everyone understood the simple truth that warmth, companionship, and a crackling fire were the ingredients for peace. Hours slipped by unnoticed, measured not by clocks or bells, but by the slow progression of the fire as it burned down, and by the deepening breaths of those present. Alara added another log to the hearth, and the flames revived, casting long shadows that danced lazily across the room. The young couple set their book aside and held hands, their fingers entwined peacefully. The elderly man's head nodded forward with the weight of sleep, and soon a soft snore escaped his lips, blending harmoniously with the hum of the room. The siblings finished their card game and began to talk quietly about the shapes they saw in the knots of the wooden walls, faces, animals, mountains, and waves. The knitting woman set her unfinished scarf on her lap and stared into the flames, letting her thoughts wander far beyond the inn's walls. Outside, the snow continued its steady descent, covering the path that led to the valley and muffling every echo. Inside, time seemed to slow even more, as if each second lengthened to allow the guest to savor this moment of peace. The stillness was not empty. It was full of softness and subtle details that revealed themselves only when everything else had quieted. Later, when the wind had stopped completely and the snowfall had become a fine powder, Alara opened the back door for a moment to look up at the sky. The cloud cover had broken, revealing a tapestry of stars strewn across a deep indigo canvas. Their light reflected on the snow, causing the landscape to glow faintly as though it had been painted with silver. She inhaled sharply, feeling the cold air fill her lungs and sending tiny crystals of ice into her nostrils. For a brief second, she closed her eyes to listen. The world was utterly silent, a silence so complete that it seemed to hum in her ears. In the distance, she could see the outline of the mountains, their peaks softened by snow. They stood as silent guardians, witnessing each winter and each story told by the fire. She smiled and stepped back inside, closing the door gently so as not to disturb the peace that had settled over her guests. The inn once again felt like a warm womb cradling those inside, and she felt proud of the home she maintained. She returned to her chair, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and allowed herself to sink into the same tranquility she offered others. As midnight approached, the fire burned lower and the room dimmed. Shadows deepened in corners, and the flickering light took on a softer tone. Alara spoke little, her voice used up from the stories she had told. She placed one last log on the embers, watching as a ribbon of flame curled around it and then settled into a steady glow. The guests began to drift towards sleep without planning to. One by one, they shifted in their chairs until their heads rested comfortably, breathing became slow and even, and hands relaxed their grip on mugs and knitting needles. The cat rose from its basket, stretched luxuriously, then leapt silently onto a vacant chair near the fire, curling up instantly and tucking its nose under its tail. The only sounds were the soft crackle of the fire and the gentle breathing of those within the room. Outside, the snowflakes continued to fall, but their descent had slowed, and the storm that had seemed relentless earlier now felt like a lullaby, a whisper from the sky telling everyone to sleep. The inn embraced its inhabitants, the walls and roof shielding them from the cold, while the atmosphere warmed their hearts. In the quiet hours just before dawn, the inn rested in a pocket of warmth and peace, while the outside world slept beneath a blanket of snow. The fire had burned down to glowing coals, casting a faint, pulsating light. Sleep had taken everyone, carrying them on gentle waves of dreams where they wandered through snow-laden forests and sat by firesides they had visited long ago. Alara leaned back in her chair, her breathing deep and steady, her face relaxed. In a while, morning light would begin to filter through frost-streaked windows, painting patterns on the floor and promising a world renewed. Until then, everything remained hushed and still, wrapped up in the softness of the night. Good night, dear traveler, and sleep well. May your dreams be warm and comforting, like a crackling fire on a snowy evening, and may you carry this sense of peace with you long after the story ends.